Do you think of yourself as a rule follower or a rebel? I'm usually a rule follower. Sometimes I think it would be cool to be a rebel, but then I look a step ahead and see where breaking the rules may get me into trouble. Being rebellious sounds edgy and awesome, until it leads to consequences that I would rather avoid. Being rebellious means that you don't always follow the rules. And I think we can all agree that whether you consider yourself rebellious or not, whether you love rules or hate them, our world has a lot of them. So it makes sense that when we're in spaces like this, in a church or around church people, we assume that it's just one more place with more rules for us to follow. In fact, maybe you've heard people say that being a Christian is just about following a bunch of rules. If that's how you've thought about it, I totally get it. But just for today, I want you to consider this. What if we've gotten it all wrong? What if following Jesus is just as much about the rules you break as the rules you follow? What if I told you that being rebellious isn't always a bad thing? In fact, it can be the very thing that God encourages us to do. Jesus was rebellious. That seems strange to say because so many of us have assumed following Jesus is just about following rules. But the truth is, Jesus often challenged the way things had been done. He disagreed. He debated. Sometimes he broke the rules. And it made everybody a little nervous. In fact, some powerful leaders were so bothered by Jesus that they made a plan to kill him. Here's how John, one of Jesus' disciples and closest friends, describes how Jesus responded. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. Jesus is with his closest followers, the disciples, sitting down for the feast of the Passover, a time to remember the good things God had done for the Israelite people when he freed them from slavery in Egypt. Passover happened every year, but this one was a bit different for Jesus because he knew that he was only days away from being arrested and put on trial for what would eventually lead to his death. John continues, Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Keep in mind that this took place in the culture at the time that Jesus walked the earth. In that time and place, people didn't wear shoes like you and I do now. People mostly wore sandals. And they would walk miles and miles in them on dirty roads. People's feet were so dirty and smelled so bad that it was the practice of the day to wash them when a person entered the house. Washing someone's feet was certainly not a glamorous job. In fact, it was a job that was most often delegated to the servants. No one would willingly touch everyone's dirty and smelly feet except Jesus. It must have shocked everyone. Jesus, without saying a word, breaks a rule that had existed for centuries. In fact, it's a rule that still exists today. One that I think many of us follow without thinking. The rule is, only do what you have to do. Isn't it true that's an unspoken rule in our world? You only do homework that counts for a grade. You only run as many laps as your coach requires. You only clean your room when your mom threatens to throw away everything lying on the floor. Does following this rule make you a bad person? No, it makes you a normal person. That's what makes Jesus' foot washing so remarkable. This was more than just doing something nice for his friends. Washing feet was going way beyond what a normal person would do. It wasn't required. It certainly wasn't expected. In one of his last days on earth, Jesus did the opposite of what anyone would have considered normal, and it was one of the greatest acts of rebellion in history. When he had finished washing each of the disciples' feet, he said this, "Do you understand what I have done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and rightly so, for that is what I am. Now that I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also should wash one another's feet. I have set you as an example that you should do as I have done for you. Very truly I tell you, no servant is greater than his master, nor is a messenger greater than the one who sent him. Now that you know these things, you will be blessed if you do them." This was how Jesus rebelled. He saw a world where people only looked out for themselves, and he refused to live by that rule. In other words, he rebelled in a way that honored God. He challenged what was normal or expected in a way that served others. Jesus went out of his way to serve people that his society said didn't matter at all. He did what he didn't have to do, even when it cost him his reputation and ultimately his life. He loved them to the end. And as a result, he did much more than anyone expected. He changed the world. See, that's the thing about doing something you don't have to do. It gets people's attention. It disrupts the normal way of doing things, and it changes people in a powerful way. So what does it look like for us to be rebellious enough to do something we don't have to do? One idea is to start each day by praying this simple prayer. God, here I am. Help me see ways I can help. When it comes to helping other people, it may not always be obvious. Sometimes I'm so busy I don't even notice other people around me. But when I started praying that simple prayer, I began to see more opportunities than I realized. And I think you will too. Then, as you see people that need help, help them, even when you don't have to. It really is that simple. Maybe for you, that means helping your school's facility team clean up a spill if you see it, doing chores at home without your parents having to ask, including somebody who seems to be excluded, or defending somebody who's being gossiped about, carrying grocery bags for someone you see struggling with them at the grocery store, showing respect to a teacher when everyone else is being disrespectful. When Jesus did what he didn't have to, it turned the world upside down. When you and I serve in a way we don't have to, I think it can have a similar effect. That's why I challenge everyone here to be rebellious enough to do what you don't have to do. Let's pray and ask God to help us. God, bring some rebellious spirit into our lives. When we get stuck in cycles of only doing what we have to do, show us how to rebel like Jesus did. God, here we are. Help us see ways